Already on, so we have the skill info for BREADY here, and it came out hours ago while I was sleeping. So we're gonna see what this is about. Let's see what her stuff is looking like, her little animations and stuff like that. And then we're gonna see how cool she is. So I don't really care for the first part. We've already seen all that throughout the stuff they've been posting and stuff like that. So we can just go ahead and like ignore that. Let's see the burst skill animation though. Is it cool? Is it good? What's the burst skill animation? Don't make a character look like that and then okay. Sorry, stuff just popped up. That's not the craziest to me. Okay. She's a sniper rifle, so I already don't like her as much. I don't like sniper rifle characters. I don't like I just don't like sniper rifles, right? But it's okay. Let's take a look and see what her kit is, right? Let me make sure you guys can see this. Okay, you guys can. So she's a burst 3 water sniper attacker, which I expected her to be. I honestly felt like she was going to be a burst 2 for a second, but I was like, oh, she's such a DPS. She's a burst 3 for sure, right? I'm seeing a lot of attack damage, attack, so she has to be good, right? Anyways, it says, and I quote, wait, I'm sorry. Things are just opening up. I just opened the laptop. Give me a second. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so when activates when entering a full burst, affects self, gives herself an attack buff of 50.05% for 10 seconds. That's already good because any burst rotation, whether you're using her burst skill or not her burst skill, she's gonna have that attack buff, right? If you enter a full burst. Now, I just hope that if they are going to be doing that, give her something in her kit that allows her to do damage outside of her burst skill, because this is what they did for, I think it was the Asuka or with the Rei, one of the characters where they had, or I think it was Mana actually. It was like they had an attack buff, right? Basically the entire game, but it was basically pathetic unless they had their burst skill active at the same time. So I don't really like that as much, but I mean, if they're not going to be doing something outside of the burst skill, then I don't really like it as much. All right, do something like what you guys did for Ein, in my personal opinion. Anyways, second part, activates when gaining the buff that increases sustained damage, affects self. Lingering taste, charge speed decreased by 50% for 50 seconds. This effect cannot be dispelled, removes recommended taste. What? So if you get a buff that increases sustained damage, then she will have a decrease of charge speed by 50%. And then it says if she gets a buff, the second part or the third part there is if she gets a buff that increases distributed damage while not into the sustained damage increasing status, then she will have charge speed decreased by 50%. So either way, if she gets sustained damage or she gets a distributed damage buff, she will have her charge speed decreased by 50%. Now, I don't know why they would want to do that for a sniper rifle. Personally, I don't know why they would want to do that for a sniper rifle, but we're going to find out right now. There has to be something that makes sense there. Right, I see. So if you look at the second skill, it says after landing 3 full charge attacks while in lingering taste status, affects the target. Damage taken increased by 10% for 5 seconds, and then after taste deals 455% of final attack and sustained damage every 1 second for 5 seconds. Now that's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy. So that's why they lowered the charge speed, because if she had regular charge speed and was landing 3 full charge attacks, dealing 455% of final attack and sustained damage every 1 second for 5 seconds would be too much. That's already, what, 2,000, almost 2,000%? Basically, that's almost 2,000% she would be dealing every 3 full charge, like for 5 seconds, right? That would be too much. So it makes sense why they had to decrease the charge, because then she would just be broken. That would be way too strong, especially for someone who already has a permanent attack, or not permanent, but an attack buff of 50% when you enter a full charge, right? That's too crazy. All right, and then it says activate when hitting a target with full charge while in the recommended taste. So this is if you're in the distributed damage buff, you get an attack damage buff for what's it called, 40% attack damage buff for 5 seconds. So if you're in the lingering taste, you get a damaging effect, right? If you're not in the lingering taste, you get an attack damage buff, which is kind of crazy, right? And then if you guys take a look here, it says activates when hitting the target with a full charge while in the recommended taste status, affects all enemies, deals 503 of final attack and distributed damage. That is crazy. That's crazy. I think you would want to be in distributed damage buff. I feel like you would want to be in the distributed damage buff. It's kind of hard to say. Because after landing 3 full charge attacks with lingering taste, then you have this after. It's so crazy. It's kind of hard to say. What do you want to be in then? Do you want to be in the sustained damage, or do you want to be in distributed damage? Because in distributed damage, you're basically permanently having an attack damage buff of 40%, basically, because every full charge that you land on a target, you get that, like that reapplies. That's crazy. And then for every full charge that you hit, all enemies will deal 500% final attack of distributed damage to one single enemy. That's just 500%, additional 500% per full charge. On top of, obviously, the attack damage buff, if you're doing a full burst on top of the attack buff. It's kind of crazy. And then if you take a look at her burst skill, it says effects of damage, attack damage buff increased by 60% for 10 seconds. And then if you're in the lingering taste status, aftertaste effect is increased by 300% for 10 seconds, which is just beyond silly. And then activates if you're in the recommended taste status, gives yourself an additional attack buff by 50%. So it's kind of hard to say. I feel like you might want to be in the after the burst skill. I think you want to be in the aftertaste. I think you would want to be in the lingering taste, like the lingering taste status. I think so, because that's already 455% final attack at sustained damage every 1 second for 5 seconds, on top of 300%, and that's final attack. You still have the attack damage buff guaranteed. You still have your attack buff from herself, and then whoever else is on the team is also supporting this, right? On top of an additional 300% to that 400% every 1 sec for 5 seconds is quite crazy. I feel like, I don't know, it's kind of hard, but either way, this character is kind of broken. Like, genuinely, this character is kind of broken. If they didn't give her that charge speed decreased by 50%, she would probably be the hardest hitting character in the game, because then that would just be outlandish, right? But my thing is, what if you give a character, even though it says charge speed decreased by 50%, what if you bring a character that can increase your charge speed basically back up by 50%? I don't think there is a character in the game, but basically, if you freaking put a character on your team that can replace that decrease by 50 by increasing 50, you would be back at normal speed. And then by being back at normal speed, you would have all these effects basically at normal speed. That's how I see it personally. So it's like, I'm going to try to work around this character. There's a lot of fun teams you can do with this one, whether it's supports, for like just damage supports, or actually like support in terms of how fast she's attacking and stuff like that. There's a lot of support you can do here, but I think this character is kind of crazy. I'm not going to lie to you. And this is a water DPS, so she might not, I'm not going to say she's a must have. Like, don't get me wrong, y'all. We're at the end of the month. The end of April is when we have the half anniversary. So this is like bait in my opinion. If you want me to be honest, it's bait in my opinion. If you look at water DPS, she's a regular character. You can get her anytime. But if you do look at the water DPSs, we don't got that much. We have Helm, we have Lamilla, we have Guillotine and Amelia, Phantom and Quincy as well. These are all great characters, but this after Helm might be the strongest water DPS, or she might even be stronger than Helm in terms of actual DPS, right? Not to mention, Helm would be a great character for BREADY as well, because when you enter a full charge, you get an additional attack damage buff, right? Attack damage buff guaranteed. So this would be like, her and Helm would be great, and they're both snipers as well. So it's kind of hard to say, but I would definitely say she's a good character. I think both of her effects are great. I think landing 3 full charge attacks in the lingering status to get a sustained damage buff every 1 second for 5 seconds at that percentage on top of the additional 300% is great. And then I think if you do have the distributed damage buff, just having that permanent attack damage buff and then 503% is great. I think that's good, because if it's 503% to one enemy, means that she's dealing 500% every full charge to one single enemy. That's crazy. Right? That's just crazy, because she already has way too much buffs going on, right? So I do think BREADY is pretty good, but you guys let me know. They're dropping too many good characters this year, and it's actually like, ugh, what bad character have we had this year? None, because Trina isn't bad, right? Like, we've had no bad characters this year, which is kind of crazy. We've had Mana, very good. Master and Anchor together are very good. Rappy is very good. Ray and Oscar are very good. And now BREADY, very good. Like, we've had nothing but good characters. And Trina is very good. We have nothing but good characters this year. So, hey, this one might be bait, because like I said, at the end of April, we are having the half anniversary. But you guys let me know what you think. It's your boy Zxous. I'm out. Peace.